The incarnation of the Lord Jesus Christ, as seen through the single lens of the Nativity at Bethlehem, marks a turning point in the history of the human race. When we ponder this event, we must strive to comprehend the majesty of what truly transpired here, nothing less than that God became man. Furthermore, in the moment of the Nativity, God became not a human in the full splendor of adult maturity, but rather something far humbler and thus something far more astonishing, just a mere little babe. In this regard, the wisdom of the Church Fathers helps us to reflect on the glorious profundity of what transpired in Bethlehem on that most sacred night of the Lord's birth. A dramatic ontological chasm exists between the divine and the human, separating God from man. In this regard, the theology of the Church Fathers makes certain assumptions about God on the one hand, and about human beings on the other. To them, God is, by definition, the supreme first principle of the universe. God thus has certain qualities. First, He is eternal, meaning that God has always existed forever unto ages of ages before the world's beginning. For if something were older than God, then God would be junior to it, and on account of this other thing's priority of antiquity, its existing first, this something would have a claim to be God over him. Second, God is omnipotent, meaning that He is all-powerful and almighty. For if something were more powerful than God, then this something would be supreme over Him, and so would be God instead. Third, God is omniscient. For if God is all-powerful, then He must be all-knowing too. Fourth, God is immaterial, meaning that God is neither constituted by physical matter nor subject to its constraints, for God is beyond the material world, and if, to the contrary, He were contained within it, then the thing containing Him would be greater than Him, and thus would be God itself. Fifth, God is immutable, meaning that God is always the same, always consistent, and so never changes. For God is perfect, and what is supremely perfect does not change, since such change in God would entail deterioration from a state of perfection to a new altered state of imperfection in relation to what came before. Finally, God is impassible, meaning that God does not suffer and is never subject to domination by external forces. For if something were to dominate God, then this mightier thing would be greater than Him, and thus would be God itself. The Trisagion, one of the great hymns of the ancient church, suggests all these ideas in a few short yet profound lines. Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, have mercy on us. In fact, some of the Church Fathers even argued that human words cannot even be used to describe God, because God is so different from humans. Such epitomizes the lofty conception of God in Christian tradition. As we reflect on the Nativity, we must keep it in mind. Because if all these qualities are essential attributes of God, surely they are not natural qualities of man. After all, human beings are neither eternal, nor are they omnipotent, nor omniscient, nor immaterial, nor immutable, nor impassible. Hence the great gulf, the infinite, immeasurable gap, which divides God from humanity. And if these divine qualities do not pertain to a mature human being in the peak of his mental and physical fitness, how much more so do they fail to pertain to a newborn child? Yet God Himself was just such a babe at the hour of His nativity in Bethlehem. Hence the deep paradox, the sublime mystery, the grand solemnity of the Lord's incarnation, epitomized in the moment of His birth on that most sacred night so long ago. The Church Fathers help us to appreciate the paradox of the Nativity, for they call attention to the disparity between God's natural divine attributes on the one hand, and on the other hand, those human attributes He assumed as the incarnate babe held in Mary's arms on that first Christmas night. How was that baby eternal? For He had been born into life from Mary mere hours before. How was that baby almighty? For He was dependent on the care of His mother for all things, and when Herod's lieutenants came to persecute Him, that vulnerable child, the Lord of angelic hosts, fled before mere human hunters. How was that baby all-knowing? For He was a newborn child incapable even of the simplest speech. How was that baby immaterial? For His mother held His little body to her bosom, so containing the uncontainable in her arms, while feeding his tiny mouth with her milk, so that his solid flesh might grow. How was that baby impassible? For he suffered pangs of hunger, thirst, and discomfort, just like any other child, and his cries rent the night air to betray that he, the maker of all, was himself in need of nourishment from what he himself had created. Alluding to the mystery of it all, Ephraim exclaims, "Today a child was born, and he was called Wonder, for it is a wonder that God reveals himself as an infant." Indeed a wonder, for how was this possible? How was this little child the eternal, omnipotent, omniscient, immaterial, immutable, impassible Lord of the universe? The Church Fathers answer this question by reminding us of this child's identity. In short, that this child was God, because what transpired here was a wondrous union between God and man, in which God was still God, even if now he became flesh. The child was truly an infant, yes, but in the end, we must remember the child's identity. For who was he? None other than the one eternal God, he who had existed forever, yet who had descended from on high to assume all the properties of human experience. So even if as a human child, the Christ child, like all children, was meek, simple, fragile, small, and vulnerable, at the same time, he remained God the Divine Word, albeit God the Divine Word in a new state, that is, God the Divine Word in the flesh. Therefore, this child was the holy, mighty, and immortal master of the cosmos, and he retained all the divine properties naturally belonging to him as God. Yet now these divine properties coexisted alongside the human properties, the meekness, mildness, simplicity, fragility of a babe, which he had taken on to himself in his incarnation, his wondrous condescension to the human condition. Cyril of Alexandria, preaching on the Nativity, states the idea thus: Christ is the true Son, that is, he is the Son of God the Father by nature, even when he had become flesh. For he continued, as I have said, to be that which he had ever been, though he took upon him that which he had not been. The Christ child was indeed a baby born into the world through a natural birth from his mother. Yet at the same time, the identity of that baby did not begin there, for he was the God who had existed forever, and he retained his identity as true God even after assuming flesh. This is the significance and the deep paradox of the Nativity. The Lord's birth at Bethlehem epitomizes the fact that God became man, and that, in doing so, he eschewed no part of human experience, down to time on earth as a tiny little baby. The Fathers of the Church help us to reflect on the reasons for God's loving abasement, that free act of divine condescension to the human condition, which resulted in the birth of the incarnate Lord inside a humble stable at Bethlehem. In order to save humanity, the Fathers of the Church teach that God needed to assume all features of regular human life, because, by assuming each of these features, the God-man Jesus Christ purified every single one of them through their intimate contact with his own radiant salvific divinity. As Gregory Nazianzen once phrased the idea, what has not been assumed has not been healed. It is what is united to his divinity that is saved. Yet in order to achieve the full cleansing of humanity, the Son of God needed to live a full human life. This meant living all parts of human life and all parts of human experience, including those first hours as a babe, just as all humans do. Hence the Nativity at Bethlehem, where the Virgin Mary gave birth to the child who was God, nursing the Lord of the universe at her breast, holding his tiny body in her arms as he slept. By dwelling as a child, God purified and sanctified all parts of human experience, down even to that moment when each of us, every single human alive, first comes forth from the womb. This child saved us, and Christians profess that he is God. And so today, they continue to reverence the baby Jesus alongside those wise men who were the very first to adore him at Bethlehem so long ago. In this regard, one of the most popular themes in ancient Christian iconography, the same art that the Church Fathers saw in their liturgical spaces as they worshipped and prayed, was the image of the Magi before the Christ child. This scene appears very often in the art preserved to us from antiquity. The fondness of ancient Christians for depicting the Magi reminds us of what they believed long ago and what we believe today, the reality of what transpired at Bethlehem on the first Christmas night long ago. In that rustic stable, 3 kings of the East fell prostrate in reverence before the child of a common mother, a babe born within the humble town of Bethlehem. Yet the child whom these 3 great kings of the earth worshipped was, indeed, the earth's very creator. And, like the wise men who brought precious gifts to the newborn Jesus, the wisdom of the early church reminds us to approach the Christ child, eternal God, newborn babe, with gifts of prayer offered forth from our own hearts, laying our faith and our love at his feet, just as the Magi themselves once laid before him their gifts of frankincense, gold, and myrrh. In the English language, the term Christmas refers to the Roman Catholic practice of holding a Mass on December 25th to celebrate the birth of Christ. Therefore, the Mass of Christ, or Christ Mass. The scriptures do not specify on which exact day of the year Jesus was born. Luke chapter 2 verse 8 claims that near the place where Jesus was born in Bethlehem, there were shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock at night. A plausible suggestion regarding the date of Jesus' birth is that it cannot be December, since the sheep would not survive grazing out in the fields overnight in the winter months like December and January in Bethlehem. Piecing together the evidence found in Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapters 2 and 3, some scholars think that Jesus was born in mid to late September. However, the liturgical celebration of Christmas was not set to account for the historical date as much as it was set to manifest deep theological meanings regarding the birth of the creation in Christ's Nativity, as we will see in this video. The birth of Christ has been celebrated by Christians in various parts of the world on dates other than December 25th. Generally speaking, Eastern and Oriental Orthodox Christians currently celebrate the birth of Christ on January 7th. However, the Armenian Apostolic and Evangelical churches celebrate Christmas on January 6th. The earliest Christians did not celebrate the birth of Christ on a specific day of the year. Clement and Origen of Alexandria, for example, bragged that Christians did not try to figure out the anniversary of Jesus' birth because the practice of remembering a birthday was something only pagans and sinners did. In the early church era, Jesus and Christian martyrs were more likely remembered for the day of the year on which they died as a testimony of their faith. This is why church historians are so often vague in claiming birth years, but very definitive in claiming exact dates and years of martyrs' deaths. This explains why there was a controversy about when to celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ in the early church, but no controversy about when to celebrate the birth of Christ. While the incarnation of Christ, or Jesus' becoming a man, is very important to Christian theology, the exact date of his birth was not important to Christians in the earliest era of church history. How then did the Western Church come to celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th? By the 4th century, we find the Eastern Church celebrating Jesus' birth on January 6th and calling it the Day of Epiphany, or Three Kings Day. It was said to be the day that the Magi visited Jesus in Bethlehem, and also the day that Jesus was baptized. The Eastern Church celebrates Jesus' birth on this day of the year. The first mention of the celebration of Jesus' birth on December 25th comes from the Chronicon of Hippolytus of Rome, written in about the year 235. The week of the winter solstice, which includes the shortest days of the year, had long been celebrated by countries in the northern hemisphere as a natural seasonal turning point, after which the days would start to get longer. The sun would begin to return, so the cycle of life would return with the sun. Local celebrations of renewed life and light were easily adopted by Christians who celebrated Jesus as the bringer of life and light to all people. Since the Romans were already celebrating their agricultural god, Saturn, on that week, Christians found it fitting to celebrate the birth of Jesus on the same week as the Roman Saturnalia. Insofar as some theologians liked nice, tidy calendars, it also has been suggested that Jesus was conceived on what would become Easter Sunday and was born 9 months later. When the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity in the early 4th century, many buildings and celebrations that had been in honor of the Roman gods were repurposed for Christian meetings and celebrations. The Saturnalia included gift-giving, loosening up of normal dress codes, and role reversals between parents and their youngest children, or masters and their lowest slaves. The celebration would end with giving candles as gifts. Jesus Christ, being God's gift to the world, was too easy of a theme to assimilate, as was the role reversal of the King of Kings becoming a lowly baby born in a manger. Then there is Santa Claus. He has several names across Europe: Father Christmas, Grandfather Frost, Old Man Winter, Kris Kringle, and of course, Saint Nicholas. The term Santa Claus derives from the Dutch word Sinterklaas, which is their way of saying Saint Nicholas. Some early British Christian groups, such as the Puritans and Pilgrims, who migrated to the northeast coast of what is now the United States of America, were strongly opposed to the celebration of any Catholic saint. However, the Dutch settlers in New Amsterdam, later known as New York, were very fond of their celebrations involving Santa Claus. Stories about Santa Claus in Europe and the New World varied greatly, but often included Santa Clauses giving gifts to children, hanging holly wreaths, which were said to be the bush used to form Jesus' crown of thorns, and putting up Christmas trees, which stayed green all year to celebrate new life. The earliest Christmas trees in Germany were decorated with candles and candy. Some even credit the reformer Martin Luther with the invention of the Christmas tree. Was there really a Saint Nicholas? Yes, there was. Even though little is known about him, he has been widely and enthusiastically celebrated in both the Eastern and Western churches. Nicholas was the bishop of Myra, a town in Lycia, Asia Minor, in the early 4th century. Although there is a story told about his punching the heretic Arius in the face at the Council of Nicaea, which has circulated widely as a meme on the internet, Nicholas's name cannot be found on any list of attendees of that council, nor did any of his contemporaries mention his attendance there. His church was built on the southern coast of modern-day Turkey, and he eventually became known as the patron saint of sailors, children, thieves, and Russia. Nicholas's legacy includes generosity for children, so when his bones were said to be stolen from his church in Turkey and removed to Bari, Italy, his tradition of providing gifts for children was celebrated widely throughout the West. Even though Nicholas's Day is celebrated by Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic Christians on December 6th, and on December 19th by the Eastern Christians using the Julian calendar, his legend was incorporated into Western Christmas traditions on December 25th. The birth of Jesus Christ, whether celebrated in Eastern traditions on January 6th or 7th, or as Christmas Day in Western traditions on December 25th, is important to Christians everywhere. The Son of God, Jesus Christ, lived among his people. He became man to bring life, light, and joy into the world. So these themes continue to be part of Christian celebrations of the birth of their Savior, Jesus Christ the Lord. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and share, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos.